Welcome to another edition of the Daily Records Off the Record podcast with me, David McCarthy, and Keith Jackson, as we continue our quest to find the stories behind the stories told by the men at the very centre of them. Today we welcome into our virtual office one of the few men who has worn the colours of both Rangers and Celtic, where he won league and cup doubles with both clubs, yet he may well best be remembered for the leadership qualities he showed in the Maroon of Hearts as Vladimir Romanov ran riot at Tynecastle. All that and 32 caps for Scotland. Elvis has entered the building. Welcome, Steven Pressley. How are you doing, Stephen?
I'm very well, David. Thank you for that intro.
Well, actually, Elvis, do you know something? I was just thinking before we sat down here. What do we go back? 30 years? 30 years?
Yeah, longer actually, Keith.
My God.
32 years, I think.
Wow, that's why I'm having to wear glasses now, you see that? But I was thinking, do you know what, the funny thing is, right, because we've got a list of stuff that I'm sure we'll rattle through when we look back at your glorious career. But the thing that struck me when I first got to know you, I thought, what a very polite, professional young man, almost painfully shy. And then you look through what we're about to discuss here, and you're more like one of footballers' hellraisers when you look at the list of things that have happened to you and that you've been involved in down the years. It's quite you're a contradiction, big man. A walking, talking contradiction.
You know, some I've actually been described by some as a little bit of a lone wolf type character. You know, I'm quite a independent type guy. You know, you've known me all these years. I'm not reliant on others. I'm very much, you know, my own person, and I like my own space, and it's kind of very much me. But I'm not sure that is the perception, to be honest with you. But it is me. It is me. You know, I was very much like I said, very much a family man, very much my own man. You know, and didn't really get involved in many things out of football. So, you know, it's...
Well, you got enough. You got involved in enough inside football.
Absolutely.
For it to still be very interesting.
Yes.
So see if we can, let's start at the beginning. I know it was a long, long time ago now, but 18 years old, debut, Champions League, coming off the bench at half-time against Marseille. I think they had Rudy Voller and Allan up front. Talk us through that. I mean, you know, were you expecting to come on that night for Richard, or how did all that pan out?
Well, I'd made my senior debut the season before. In the tail end of the season, I came on for Gary Stevens at right back, actually, and played against the late great Davy Cooper, which was a wonderful experience. But in this game,
I'll stop you there. How did you get on against him as a young kid playing against Davy Cooper? How was that?
Yeah, it was okay. It was okay. You know, it was an experience. I only played in that game for maybe, I think it was 45 minutes, but it was a great experience. You know, it was his final years of playing, but I suppose, you know, just to experience that and be on the pitch with him. He was a player that obviously, you know, I'd admired greatly from a distance. It was a great experience for myself. And then from there, actually, the following season, I hadn't started the season particularly well. I hadn't taken up from where I'd left off the previous season, and I was finding it difficult to find my form. But the one thing about Champions League football at that time with the 3 foreigner rule was it gave opportunity to the young Scottish players. And thankfully that night, you know, was an opportunity that came my way against probably the top side in Europe at that moment in time. And I came on and played it right back against actually a BD Pelly, who was the African Player of the Year at the time, a great talent. But it was just an amazing experience, you know, and to play Champions League, to play at Ibrox in such a game where it was so dramatic, to be honest, was amazing, and obviously then propelled me forward, and I gained opportunity on the back of that. But that's sometimes football. Sometimes you get opportunities and you have to take them. And thankfully, although I made a mistake for one of the goals, you know, I think I performed reasonably well on that night.
And then there was the nickname Baby Goff, wasn't it?
Yes, yes. Very much that. You know,
How big a part did play in your development?
Richard or you know,
Aye, Richard Goff. How big a part did he play?
I talk a lot about, you know, my experiences of the Rangers dressing room. I was really fortunate that I came through at a time at Rangers where there were such terrific professionals in there that drove standards themselves. And I was fortunate enough. And the one thing that Rangers taught you was that you had to play and train to a standard every single day. That was driven home by Archie, by Walter, by the staff there, and also the support. You couldn't have a day off. And that kind of stuck with me all my career. It shaped me, it moulded me. And also as well, what people don't understand is going into these types of dressing rooms, you know, Durante, McCoist, you know, all of these characters and personalities, they killed you. They absolutely killed you. You had to form a thick skin, and it was great for me in that respect. You know, you had to become a resilient character, and you know, I was shaped during those years, and I was lucky. But and certainly, you know, even go back, you know, I'm now head of individual development, but the importance of repetition started there. You know, I wasn't particularly good in the air when I first went there. I was a striker converted to a centre back, and I had to develop that part. And Archie and Billy Kirk would have me out, you know, afternoon after afternoon, just heading balls, working on the absolute basics.
You wouldn't be allowed to do that now, Elvis.
I find that part difficult, Keith, because do we want to deny people the opportunity? If I went back in time and knew what I did now, I would still go through the same process, because heading became a really strong part of my game, and without heading, I might not have had the career that I had. So the question is, do we deny kids the opportunity to be what they're good at? My young son's a number 9, big striker. Now, he'll probably make a career from link and heading. Do we deny him the chance to get very good at what he's good at? So there's a lot of debates there, and certainly I wouldn't change it for myself. I realise the risks, but it's like anything. There's always risks in life, and you weigh them up, and I would do the same again.
That's interesting. And in terms of your personal development, Stephen, in that dressing room, as you said, I mean, massive characters. Right?
Amazing characters.
There's no shy guys in there. But for you to be a young kid, and you were, as I said, naturally a kind of quieter, more introverted sort.
Yeah.
How did you manage that adjustment? Did you have to bring yourself out in terms of personality, character? Was that an important early lesson?
I think so, Keith. You know, the amazing thing is, as well, I talk a lot about this, about, you know, people form opinions of people based on what they see on the pitch. And the reality is very different. I was a real communicator on the pitch, a huge talker. And even when I went into the first team at a very early age, I wasn't intimidated in that respect. I would tell senior pros, you know, within the games, within the training, within a Saturday, you know, I would give them instructions. I'd be quite strong on certain things. But it was a dressing room that kind of accepted that wanted that. So I fitted in quite well on, you know, in that regard. The other part of it, you know, I just had to learn to get thick skin, because Durante was severe. We are talking severe. It was from the moment you walked in the door. And I seemed to be at that time, I seemed to be the one that he went after. He was continuously on my case, and but it shaped me. It moulded me.
Was there any particular pranks or anything like that that pulled on?
Even in the see when I think back, Keith, to like the dressing room. When I first went into Rangers as a 16, 17-year-old boy, they called the person within the away dressing room the Phantom, right? And the Phantom would do things to your gear when you went out to training. It would do various things. I'd come back in my tie, because at that time we had to turn up in shirt and tie. My tie would be in the Gatorade. I remember spending a lot of money. On a nice pair of shoes to go with my slacks when I came in. Came back, and somebody put a nail in them and hammered them into the floor. So all of these things. And listen, there was nothing you could do at that time. It was just relentless. It was severe. But that was the dressing rooms then.
And the Phantom was Ian Durant.
These days it would be
Well, I'm not sure. You know that, actually, I'm not
it.
sure it was in the away dressing room. No, I think it was Ian McCall. To be honest with you, it was like Ian McCall and
Well,
Gary.
you're lucky that's all he did to your shoes then.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell us this then. So, I mean, you had, you won a Scottish Cup medal with Rangers. I think you won as a sub in the final. You won a league championship with Rangers as well. You were obviously in and about it. What made you take the plunge to leave? Because for most young lads, that's the be all and end all. You're at Rangers, you're in the first team squad. What was the reason behind your decision to up sticks and get into Coventry?
Well, David, the interesting thing is at the time, the top teams in Scotland were probably comparable as well with the top teams in England at that time. Maybe the gap was just beginning to take place in the respect of the first year of the Premier League. I was just, listen, I lost my father at that time, who was a big influence on my career. And I didn't really have that guiding kind of experience around me. And I missed that because he would have. I'd been offered a 3 or 4 year contract by Rangers at the time, but I was impatient. I actually thought at the time I was a better player than I was. I actually thought I was ahead of where I was. And going to play in the Premier League, although I performed well in certain games, I was exposed in others, and it told me where I was. I wasn't quite ready for playing week in, week out. Yeah, I did think that at the time at Rangers, and I was a boy that wanted to play. I was never happy just being part of something. I wanted to play, I wanted to be involved, and I just chose to take the next step. And in hindsight, I look back and Walter told me all of these things at the time, that I had to be patient and wait. And he was correct. He was correct. But, I was a little bit headstrong, and I chose to make the decision of going to Coventry. And it was a real learning curve for me.
Yeah, but, having said all that, you did go on to have an absolutely fabulous career. So, although you're saying it was maybe a mistake initially, I don't suppose there's too many regrets that you've had in your career.
No, there's quite a lot. Even when I went to Coventry, I said there I'd lost my father not long before moving down there. And in those days, there isn't, what you get now where you move into a new club, a Premier League club, everything's looked after for you. Accommodation, your food, whether you're settled, whether you're happy, they're doing everything to make the players' transition easy. In those days, you arrived and that was you, really. And in those days, we didn't have the mobile phones that we do today, where you can, FaceTime people, speak to people regularly. It wasn't like that. And I became really homesick very quickly. And not long into my time there, Billy Kirkwood got the Dundee United job, and he contacted me to see if I'd be interested in joining him there. So that added to the feeling of a degree of homesick. And I made my mind up at the end of the season that I would go. And again, in hindsight, I wish I'd stayed. I really do, because I think I would have played regular at Coventry and regular in the Premier League again in the years to come. But my impatience, what I'd experienced, I decided to move and kind of join a coach that had a big influence on my development.
What were you, 19, 20 around about then, Elvis?
2021, Keith. I think
Right.
21. I think 21 when I was at Coventry, which in terms of a centre-back, and especially a centre-back that didn't turn into a centre-back until he was 16, 17, it was quite early in my, there's certain positions, I know this from my own experiences, there's positions on the park that you really don't reach your levels till your mid-20s, and that's certainly one of them with centre-back. So I was young in that respect. Physically, I hadn't grown into my body yet. So I just have regrets on the early part of my career. It's not regret. They're all experiences and they all shaped me as a person. But, you know, in hindsight, if I could go back, I probably wouldn't have left Rangers, and then I wouldn't have left Coventry after only one season.
But it's dealing with different things, isn't it? You're a young guy. You're not mature enough really to make these big life decisions at that point. We were all the same at that age, isn't it?
I know.
These are big decisions to make.
Aye, but what's quite interesting, Keith, is that if I take that, sometimes what I feel is if you go to England and then you go back up the road very quickly, you sometimes find that you don't get the opportunity to come down. Again, it's not so easy to come down. Now, I did get the opportunity when I went to Celtic, that I had the opportunity to go to Charlton in the Premier League at that time, but I had to wait nearly another 10, 11 years for that opportunity. And I also felt, so when you talk about, you know, lessons and learning from them, it was a little bit like that in my managerial career. I'd come down here and I didn't want to return. I think sometimes it's easy to go back into the environment that we know and we're comfortable in. But I didn't want to do that with my managerial career. I kind of wanted to make my own way without coming back to Scotland. It wasn't that I didn't feel that Scotland was good. It was just I wanted to make my own way in England. And I sometimes feel as well, and I would say this about a number of our coaches up the road that are really good coaches, they probably, after coming to England and then returning immediately back to Scotland, have found it much harder to get the level of job that actually they deserve.
Mm-hmm. Well, you were lambasted for that, weren't you? Because at one point, I think, I remember you saying once you'd gone down there, I'm not coming back, I don't want to work in Scottish football anymore. That was the way it was perceived.
Yeah, it was perceived that way. It wasn't what I said. It was that I didn't want to come back at this moment in time, that I wanted to pursue my time. It's, again, learning from experiences as a player. And I do believe that as a coach, if you come down and you lose your job and go immediately back to Scotland, I think it's harder then to come back again.
Yeah.
So I tried to learn from my experiences. Of course, people don't want to know that, but that's the reality of the situation. And I do feel that. You know, I feel that some are coaches that are really good coaches maybe haven't had the opportunity down here because they returned quickly.
Mm-hmm.
See, to go back to your playing career, you came back up the road, you joined up Dundee United, played 100 or so games for them, and then, you know, it was the move to Hearts. And basically, as I said at the start of this and the kind of introduction to the whole thing, I think that that's where, you know, like, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but, you know, you played for Rangers, you played for Celtic, but I think in most people's mind, people think of Steven Pressley as a Hearts player. I don't know whether you feel that that's where, you know, the majority of your reputation was built. I don't know, but
definitely,
that's kind of outside perception.
No, I think you're right on that, David. You know, I think that most people would consider me, you know, or look back at my time as the Hearts captain. So, you know, and I really enjoyed my time at Dundee United. We had great success there. We actually, during that period, we got promotion, and then we the following season, I think it was the last time they finished third in the Premier League, we qualified for Europe. So it was a really successful period at the club, and I really enjoyed it. I played a lot of football there, but most certainly, and again, it goes back to the years that I had at Hearts. I think that for a centre-back, they were my most ripe years, my years where I'd kind of learned the trade, I'd earned my stripes, and I understood the game, and all of those experiences came together during that period. So I think it was definitely my best period of my career, and probably, like you say, the one that everybody would refer to.
It was Jim Jeffries that brought you in, wasn't it? He was the manager at the time, Elvis. And
it wasn't an easy transition. You know that.
For what reasons?
It's quite... there was a couple of reasons. That I came from Dundee United into a team that had good success the year before, and they just won the cup. And I think I arrived as possibly their highest paid player. And the problem was the agent I had at the time was the agent of a number of other players within that dressing room.
So they all knew who you were on.
So they all knew. So I don't think it went down. I don't think it went down particularly well. So I think there was a little bit of resentment when I arrived. Also, when I initially played, I was played as a right back. Mm-hmm. When I first came into the team, and to be honest with you, I played right back in my early years at Rangers, but I was never a right back, and I didn't really endear myself to the support too quickly. So I didn't perform very well in my initial 2 or 3 months, found myself out of the team, and found it difficult. And then I had to battle back, regain my place, and then from there on, once I got back in and played centre-back, I kind of never looked back at that period. But the first 4 or 5 months were not easy. Even within the dressing room, I didn't think it was so easy. I don't think people liked the fact that I told what I told you. It didn't go down particularly well. And I understand that. But it wasn't my doing, of course. But that's the kind of environment you're in.
So how did you go on with Billy and Jim? Because wee Billy Brown has often told me that was bad cop, worse cop. But how did you go on?
Yeah, listen. The one thing I would say was, that football has changed a great deal over the last 10 years in terms of the coaching methods, in terms of the detail that coaches are working to, in terms of analysis. But both of them were very good at what they were. Jim was a manager that led a little bit by fear. He was strong, but he still had that soft side to him. But he was a strong manager. He had a really good eye for a player. He recruited really well. And Billy put on very good sessions, very intense sessions. There wasn't a lot of detail in terms of tactical detail, but that was the case at that time. That was the kind of era. But I can see why during that period they were very successful. I do. I liked the sessions. I liked working with them. And they eventually gave me the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, Steven talks about... Sorry.
No, I was just going. At what point do you then come from battling your way just to nail down a regular place in a position you want to play, to really starting to feel at home, to becoming the captain, to feeling Mr. Hearts, because that's what ultimately you became?
Well, it's interesting, Keith, because after 18 months, I actually won the Federation's Player of the Year. So the first 5-6 months were difficult. I then really accelerated from there. So I had a really fruitful period after that. And then when Craig Levine came in, Craig spoke to me about signing a new deal, a long-term deal, and that he wanted me to be the captain of his team and lead the club forward. And, thankfully, he gave me the opportunity to do that. And, I think my personality as well, it's funny because, even when I went, I remember going to Celtic, and my first day at Celtic, I got on the bus and was shaking, and Neil refused to shake my hand because...
Neil Lennon?
Yeah, and we grew to really like each other, but we'd had some real moments on the pitch. And the interesting thing is that I've tried to say this to people, that when I look back at my career and I look back at some of the behaviour of me on the pitch and some of the things that I said to people, I really don't like it. But it's what I did. It's what I did on a Saturday. It was like, turning out up at the theatre and you became a different character for that.
See it all the time, Elvis. You see it all the time. Guys like Scott Brown, all these...
Absolutely.
They've got an in-game persona. Which is absolutely no resemblance to what they're like off the pitch.
And that's what I actually became. I actually gave myself the nickname of the daddy on the pitch. I used to say to people that I was the daddy. And just, I did. And I look back at that and I think, come on, Steve. But that's what I did to play with people's minds. That's what I did to try and intimidate others and affect others.
when you went on that bus that day, I'm saying when you went on that bus that day and Lenny refused to shake your hands, I mean, was it a jocular thing or was he quite serious? No, I don't want anything to do with you.
No, it was quite serious. It was quite serious. It wasn't like, he was playing around with me. I think Neil as well was one that wanted to test you a little bit, and actually we became good teammates. I really liked Neil. I've seen a lot of things in Neil that I could see in myself. But he did that, and I accepted that's what it was, that we'd had some real battles, some real words on the field of play.
I'll stop you there, Elvis. Did you have to think back and think, shit, what was it I said to him?
No.
Did you know? Did you know what the incident was?
No, I knew there was a few, and I knew that one in particular, I think Rudy Scaccio, when there was a spitting incident on the field of play. I don't know if you can remember that involved Neil and Rudy Scaccio, and I think I defended Rudy to the hilt on that situation, and of course Neil wasn't particularly happy with it, but they had some big personalities. Some of the run-ins in that time, Chris Sutton, I always remember Chris used to be telling me constantly that I'd be working till I was 70. Well, he's no far off it, by the way. He used to talk about his money a lot and that I would be working till I was 70 years of age. So he's actually quite right. I'm looking about 70, but...
The thing is, Sutty's having to work for every single media organisation in the face of the planet. You can't turn on anything without seeing Sutty these days.
It's so true, but they were the types of battles. But the problem was in football that actually became unpopular within certain... And also the other thing was that I never pandered to supporters of clubs that I played for prior. The Dundee United fans hated me because I would go up there and I would play the villain. I would play, I wouldn't go back there waving to the supporters looking for their adulation. I wouldn't go to Ibrox. I remember when we played Rangers once and, they gave us the ball back. I remember the game too. We hadn't started particularly well. And I thought to myself, we need to react here. We need something to really kickstart us. And they gave us the ball back from a throw-in, and we returned it down to them in the corner. And naturally, you'd allowed them to have it, but I didn't. I told everyone to get up and into positions, and we pressured them. And it was only to get a reaction from the team because I felt we were flat in some of the things that we'd been doing. But people don't see that. They just judge you on what you're doing, and it doesn't go down particularly well at the time. So all of these things that I accept that judgments are made, and I accept that people probably seen a different Steven Pressley to the one you're talking about, Keith, but it was that hour and a half, and I equally look back at it. I look back, David, at these times, and I actually cringe at some of the things that I do, and I have to laugh at some of the things I do.
What's the thing that you regret most of all the incidents, of all the...
No, they were just like...
daddy.
Yeah, just that. I used to stick my chest out to people. I used to annoy people. Obviously one of the things that used to irk when you're talking about Billy Brown and he was at Kilmarnock, the thing that I used to love when I went there was, and I built the reputation of it, is falling on the ball. Going back down into that corner, taking contact and falling on the ball and gaining free kicks.
I thought you meant when you try to control it.
By the way, Keith, just on this, right? That in one season, I think it was March, I seen the figures, and I'd been the most fouled player in the Premier League as a centre-back, right?
Did that say something to you about your popularity?
Yeah, but it was brilliant. And like I said, one of the things, falling on the ball, and I used to do it to Billy. Billy used to hate it, and I used to always do it and then look at him and do it and look at him, and it used to kill him. It used to kill him. But it was...
Where were you on celebrating, Stephen? Where were you on celebrating?
Where was I on?
Against your former team? On celebrating scoring goals against your former teams.
Again,
did you know, famously, against Hearts, did you not go nuts? Yeah. Did you not score a goal against
I scored against Hearts, but when we won the game that I returned to Celtic Park, I celebrated the victory because We won the game, and I wasn't one to try to appease the supporters. There's a couple of things on that day. There was a great article. I've actually got it on my phone because there was a lot of lies written about me that day. Not even written, not by the media, but on certain websites and discussion sites that were completely untrue. When I returned to Hearts that day as Celtic captain, I was booed from the moment I walked onto the pitch to do my warm-up. People don't remember that. I was booed every touch of the ball that I had, which I accepted at the time. Well, that's not true. I didn't accept because I'd given so much to the club, and when I left the club, I left trying to fight for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Anyway, but during the game, regardless, I wasn't out there to appease the supporters. I was out there to win the game. And for me, it was all about that. That 90 minutes, that 1 hour 45 on a Saturday afternoon, I did everything to win a game of football. And that was my only concern. It wasn't a popularity contest. It was to win.
But in that game, Elvis, I think that there was the beating of the badge, wasn't there? And
yeah, it was a beating. That bit, Keith, again, the Hearts fans seen me doing that all the time. And see, when I went back to say to you about I'm the daddy, that was what I did. I used to beat my chest and tell people I was the daddy, right? Which is quite incredible, isn't it? But that was what I did. That was kind of my what's the character? That was the personality, persona that I became on a Saturday or a Tuesday. It was that, and it was nothing other than that.
But in terms of your relationship, because I'm interested now to move into this bit, because you've become Mr. Hearts. I mean, you have, as you've just said there, you have stood up, you have taken an extraordinary risk with your own professional career in order to protect the betterment of the football club that you love. Yeah. And that's a connection. That gives you a connection then with the supporters, which, must have been incredible.
Yeah.
So for then, a couple of months down the line, and we'll come back to all that, but a couple of months down the line or a year or so down the line, and they see you beating the badge, having scored against them in a Celtic shirt.
No, I didn't score, Keith. Right. At the end, it was at the end of the game. I beat my chest.
My apologies.
I beat my chest.
My apologies. Yeah. You've mentioned a couple of things.
You should have known better, Keith. You scored many.
You mentioned a couple of things about regrets and things that you kind of think, I wish I wouldn't have done that. Does that fall into that category, or is that no, that was me doing my job and nothing to apologise for?
Certainly me doing my job. It was difficult because I was so emotional as a player. I got caught up in the game. I lived the game. I had nothing other than that in my mind in the game. Mm-hmm. It was me. So I really don't know. And you've got to remember, as I said, the Hearts supporters booed me from the moment I stepped out to do my warm-up. So it wasn't like... Well, that was disappointing. That was really disappointing after what I believed I'd given the club, the commitment I'd given the club. See, during my time at the club, and again, I wasn't one to try, I've never been this, to protect my own self. I've never been one. You know this, Keith, better than anybody. I never fed the media anything. I wasn't that type of guy. Unfortunately, I wasn't. I never fed you guys anything. I was a really private guy. If I'd got stick, I accepted the stick. But I always remember, and there was a period in my Hearts career, I actually took a 50% wage cut at one point in my career at Hearts that I never spoke publicly about to stay at the club because I was so attached to the club. I loved the club. I loved being around the club. So it was a little bit hurtful because I knew what I'd given. I knew everything that I'd given to that club. And you know what's even more hurtful? That I have been away from that football club since, I don't know now, 14 years. I've never been invited back.
Wow.
Never been invited back.
Yeah, that's incredible.
That is incredible. Never been invited back.
Aye.
And what do you put
Why
that
do you think that is?
I have no idea. It's an element that does disappoint me. And it's interesting because, again, and one of the things, and I accept this was my career, but it's, most players at the end of their career, you know, and they go into coaching, there's always openings within the clubs that they've been at that might give them opportunities to coach and work there. My trouble is that when I left Dundee United and I went back with Hearts, the Dundee United fans, you know, resented me. The Hearts fans resent me. When you've been at Rangers and Celtic, they don't particularly like you. So my ins to get into football clubs aren't particularly good. It's probably another reason I stayed in England, you know.
You see there's a pattern emerging here, Elvis.
There is a pattern emerging. And by the way, a big part of that, Keith, is my character during the 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. It became an unpopular personality with other supporters. And
And I guess a part of that is if the Hearts fans have grown, and everybody loves one of them in their own team.
Absolutely.
They're not so fond of them when they're in the opposition. But if the Hearts fans have bonded with you in the manner that they did, then to see you putting on that same game face and behaving the exact same way, that probably hurt them. They probably thought, well, that's just the relationship he has with us. No, it's not.
Absolutely.
This guy will do it for anybody.
Absolutely. But it was the same with Dundee United. You know, and I'm not, again, trying to announce, but I won the Player of the Year at Dundee United. I behaved similar. And then I went back with Hearts and behaved in the same way for Hearts that I behaved when I went back to Tynecastle with Celtic. And they didn't like that. So I accept that, but I wasn't one that felt I needed to pander to the supporters. I was one that wanted to go out, and I was playing for that team. This was my team, and we were going to do what it takes to win.
Stephen, did you ever get an awful lot of stick from Rangers supporters about the fact that you ended up being a Celtic player? And the reason why I'm asking that is because it would seem pretty obvious that you might have, but it was actually about 12 years in between, you know, the playing for the two clubs. You'd had your entire career almost, in between, going from one to the other. So in that respect, you know, did that dilute any of the kind of animosity that you might have expected to get from that, or did you still get it?
No, I still got it. One of the good things was, and when you go back to Scott Brown, I used to travel with Scott most days because I moved to Edinburgh during that period to get away from it a little bit more. But it's interesting, David, that there was certain people that were acquaintances that I'd met through my time at Rangers and through my time at various things that always kept in touch with me, that would send me Christmas cards, birthday cards, you know, I'd speak to them occasionally. So acquaintances never spoke to me ever again when I went to Celtic. You know, lost complete contact with them. And there was a number of them that went missing during that period. And I suppose that's the sacrifice. But the problem was, for me, I was an Aberdeen supporter growing up. I wasn't a Rangers supporter. I wasn't a Celtic supporter. It was football to me. And for others, I understand it runs deeper, but not for me. It's football.
Well, just to go back to the events at Hearts, because this is obviously a sort of defining moment in the whole Steven Pressley story. What went on, the Rickerton 3, the shambles that the club became under Romanov, to such a point that a guy like yourself, who, as we've said, doesn't make a habit of courting controversy or you know, rocking the boat from the inside, but you reached such a point that you felt the levels of professionalism within the football club were being eroded to such an extent that you just couldn't sit any longer and stay quiet about it. You had to. What a move that is! What a ballsy move!
Well, it was also.
Do you look back now and think you struggle to believe that you actually did it?
No, do you know what disappoints me, Keith? That I always think, and this is something that doesn't sit right with me now, and it's never sat right with me, is that I always think that during periods like that, when there's change and people stand up, there's always those that take advantage of that moment, and you know, for their own good, they move into certain positions. And I found that on the back of that, it was a real learning curve for me, that sometimes you stand up for everybody, yet there's a lot of people that are only concerned about their own situation. And I found that about that, because one of the reasons that I did it was that one, the standards within the club, the lies within the club, the honesty, everything that I felt Hearts stood for. But also, for most people, I was the one that carried the power at the time. The managers didn't even carry the power, many of them.
Because there was one coming in every second week.
There was one, absolutely. So on every single aspect, whether it was players trying to negotiate their way out of the club, whether it was certain players that were looking for operations on an injury, whether there was coaches and assistant coaches that weren't particularly happy about certain aspects, they were all coming to me. And it was relentless. It was absolutely relentless. Nothing was getting dealt with. I had all of this on my shoulders, and it just was a continuous, episode of this type of event. I was going to speak about it a number of weeks prior to when I did. I'd already decided that I was going to address it, and I spoke to Claire, and Claire, who's still at the club. Claire Cowan, yes. I spoke to Claire, who is at the club still, and I spoke to who was the media man at the time, ended up Dundee United chief executive.
I know what you're talking about. David.
Yes.
David Sutherland?
Easton?
Sutherland.
David Sutherland?
Yeah, that's correct. So I spoke to them, and they told me to put it off for a period. So I did. I waited several weeks, and then I, on the lead up to this, there'd been a number of things happened again, and I spoke to Paul, and I spoke to Craig. I'd also spoke to a number of senior professionals and a number of professionals, but I didn't want to put anybody into the situation because I was also aware that this could be the end of your time. And for Paul and Craig, there was always going to be further opportunity for them if it was to end this way. But for others, it could change their lives when they have families and children to support. So I accepted certain people's decisions on it. Although they were behind the decision, they didn't want to put themselves out there. And then I went ahead and I had obviously thought about it. I had scripted a statement that I felt addressed certain situations and certain issues, and decided to make it. And I think it was on the back, actually, a meeting with Vladimir in the dressing room where he called a number of people out. He made threats about, dropping people and players not playing again for this football club, and it was just the right timing. The amazing thing with it was that on the back of it, I was just about to say to you, David, there's a kind of myth about this guy, this tyrant. He never addressed it with me at all. I bumped into him a number of times and he never spoke to me at all. So it was never really an issue in that respect. I also think that I think back... It's all right.
Sorry. Just, I'm sure I read or I heard somewhere that one of the ways for them to try and appease you was that they actually offered you the assistant manager's job. Is that not right?
Well, see, this is the amazing thing was that I actually think, in Vlad's defence, right, that there was certain people that he had placed in the club that actually had their own agendas within the club. And I think it was a very divided club in that way. I don't think that Vlad was fed back the correct information at times. I think there was several people in there that had their own agendas, because what I'd always thought this, and what told me this was the bit you're talking about there, David, is the day that I left the club, Valdas Ivanauskas called me into his office. I had a meeting at Tynecastle at 2:00, and he called me into his office at 12:30 at the training ground, and he offered me the assistant manager's job. And I told him it would go against everything that I'd stood for. I then, 1.5 hours later, arrived at a meeting at Tynecastle where they were telling me the polar opposite. They were telling me they wanted me out this club, that it could no longer progress with me being around. So that's why I do feel there was agendas within the club.
And I don't. But never mind within the club, Stephen. Sure. Within the dressing room, there was rats inside the dressing room.
Yes, without doubt there was, Keith. Without doubt there was, and we had to
see that. It'd annoy me for the rest of my time, I think. Especially when you've had the courage of your convictions to go and do what you did for the benefit of everybody. And if you think there were rats sitting inside that dressing room alongside you who deliberately used that as an opportunity to undermine you and further their own situation, I'd find that a hard one to forgive.
Well, I just was disappointed. I was disappointed with certain things on that because, trust me, I stood up for. It wasn't just the Scots players I was standing up for. It was equally. It was the foreign players, the Lithuanian players. All of these players, they all had their own issues. Some of them weren't getting their accommodation paid. Some were getting money held back, and it wasn't easy for them in certain situations. So there was a lot of things, that came together that pushed me towards making this type of statement. And the reality was, though, on the back of that, I'm not sure that the people that had come to me with their problems and issues truly stood behind me when it came down to it.
Anybody in particular?
No.
Sorry, Keith.
No, I like so. What you've described there is a chaotic situation, a club in crisis, a dressing room full of unrest, with people with personal problems, professional problems, all because of the amateur running of a football club, and that's pretty serious. There was a lot of other stuff going on. Guys walking about with gold bars or gold rods trying to fix your knee injury and stuff like that. Was that? Could you almost put up with that? Or was it the other stuff that toppled you over the edge, or some of that other madness that was going on inside the place?
There was some of the madness. There was some incredible things happening, like the woman that you would put your finger into her device and she could tell you if you were fit. She would tell you if you were fit to play the following day. It's a great device.
Bet she did.
Listen, but I've often thought, right, that is one of the best devices ever for a football manager, right? It makes it very easy to let your player down. Before it's
red light.
Red light. You can't play tomorrow.
Go up the road today, son.
Yeah. Such a great
thing. Bring in a witch doctor as well, no?
That was.
There was a lot of witch doctor.
I think that was. Well, the lady that had this device was a lady. I think Vladimir had health problems, some cancerous problems, and I think he had helped heal him during this period, and he put all his trust in her. And it was her that came in with this amazing device. I need to get hold of it, actually. I think it's been the one thing missing from my managerial career, actually.
I wonder if Pep's got one.
Yeah.
Listen, so you've gone from that, right? So you've gone from that chaos to working with Gordon Strachan at Celtic.
Yes.
What was that like? What was he like?
Terrific.
Still pals now, isn't he?
Yeah, still friends now. I go up and see him at his house when he's back sometimes. I love his company. I love his talk on football. He's just a very, the type of manager that I liked, which was, very demanding, set really high standards, and straight to the point. He would tell you. He would tell you what was required of you. He would tell you if you didn't perform. You knew exactly where you were with him, and really, really clever on the game. Really clever on the game. I like Gordon a lot, and I'm not just saying that because he's a friend of mine, but I really enjoyed working with him.
No, you're even coaching at the Strachan Foundation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I come down there and you were just taking a session with the kids. It was
absolutely
incredible.
And I have huge respect and admiration for him, but I really enjoyed working with Gordon.
I need to ask you also, Stephen, about your...
Sorry, Dave, when you go.
No, it's fine. You carry on. I'll go back. I want to ask you about your international career, but Keith, if you've got something else you want to ask Stephen about Gordon Strachan, then carry on.
No, I mean, it was just, I'm interested how the relationships developed then inside that dressing room. Again, another massive club, again, full of massive characters. By this point, you've pissed off half the players in Scottish football, at least. And probably a hefty percentage of the ones that you're now teammates with. How long did it take for that to thaw? How and then what did Gordon do to try and help that? Did it?
Well, the hangover of the previous squad, I suppose, was no longer there. There'd been a lot of the players had left prior. Thompson had left, who was at that time during certain games was a big enemy. Chris Sutton, Hearts, and all of these guys had left that were the big personalities that probably, that I had issues with. So a lot of these guys had gone, and I actually loved my time at Celtic. I made a lot of good friends in football there, the likes of Gary Caldwell, the likes of Sean Maloney, the likes of John Kennedy, these types, Stephen McManus. There was a lot of really good personalities in the dressing room, and I've got to say, I loved my time at Celtic. I really did.
I'm going to ask you a question then. When you look back over your career, did you enjoy your time at Rangers better or your time at Celtic? It sounds to me as if you've a better memory of your time as a Celtic player.
No, I've not, Keith. I mean this. What I would say is that I was brought up through the youth at Rangers, came through, probably didn't appreciate the playing of at such a great club when you're young. You think your career is going to be, you're going to experience that all your days. So sometimes you don't appreciate where you are at that time. When I was at Celtic, it'd been, like you said, a further 10, 11 years on in my career. And I realised that you have to appreciate these moments greatly. And I did that. That was the difference. It was just that I appreciated my time at Celtic more than at Rangers because it was a different stage of my career.
Sure, David.
That makes sense. Aye, no, just want to touch on the Scotland career because 32 caps. We would all die for 32 caps, to be honest with you. And you achieved that. But there was always a thing. I remember speaking to you. You'll not remember it because I think you were still on a bit of days after the night in Ukraine where we lost 2-0. You were red carded for
my last cap.
And it was your last cap, which I certainly didn't think it was going to be at that point, and I'm pretty sure you never either. I mean, what happened here? I mean, it was a great campaign. You played alongside Gary Caldwell when we beat France at Hampden, and then you play in that game, you get sent off, and you never play for Scotland again. Why?
I think there was a number of reasons. My Scotland, my international career, again, there was some really good memories, some disappointing memories. I think we were going through a very difficult period at the time. And at times, the enjoyment had gone out of playing for Scotland. During some of the Bertie years, it was difficult years. I was
going to say, every time you saw the phone going, it was Bertie votes.
Yeah,
that would have done it for me.
It was difficult years. And, the interesting thing is Bertie's competitive games record was reasonably good. We'd actually done quite well in the competitive games. It was the friendlies, and it was difficult playing at Hampden sometimes, with so many call-offs in front of 8,000-9,000 supporters. It was a tough period, that. And then Walter came in and completely put the belief back within the team and the country, and I really enjoyed my time working there with Walter and had some really good memories of that. And then I think that Alex McLeish had just taken over after Ukraine, or not long after that, David. Mm-hmm. And what happened was I was suspended for a game of which Stephen McManus came in and played well within the game, and I never managed to get my position back after that. And then not long after that, I became a coach within the organisation. But that was really the reason that the suspension allowed Steven in there, and Steven retained his place.
We're just going to move on to your participation as a coach in George Burley's backroom setup, Steven. Looking back, it wasn't a particularly enjoyable time either, was it?
No.
In terms of the team.
Do you know what's interesting, Keith? And I remember this. I received a phone call from you not too long before I accepted the job, and you told me not to take it.
Yes.
Right? You told me not to take it, right?
Yeah.
And in hindsight, I shouldn't have taken it. The difficulty, again...
Nobody ever listens to me until it's too late.
No, I know, but it's interesting because, again, David, I do have regret. When I say regrets, I don't mean regrets. They're experiences. But there was, I understand them fully, that the problem was that I was 33 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
There was, I think I'd just received, or I'd just gone in for a back operation. You know, my career was coming to that point, a little bit of a crossroads. I was beginning to think about coaching more and more. Then this opportunity arose. And for a young 33-year-old to get the opportunity to work as an assistant coach for your national team is a huge honour, and it's something difficult to turn down. The issue was that I was still a Celtic player. And I was a Celtic player in the coaching staff when you still have a good percentage of the squad being Rangers players. So I don't think it particularly sat well with some of the Rangers players. And again, I understand the reasons. And probably, again, in hindsight, like I said, it was probably the wrong decision, but it was hard to turn down as a young player and aspiring coach. And the other thing was that they put me immediately on my pro licence. And I went through my pro licence with the SFA, which was another major factor in me taking the job. So, yes, I...
Also, you did a relationship with Burley, didn't you? Because, I mean, if Burley had stayed at Hearts, who knows what would have happened that season back in 2018.
And I had a really strong relationship with him. You know, but... And again... You don't know these things. I hope George would go in there. He made such an impression on the Hearts squad at that time that I hoped he could do similar at Scotland. It wasn't to be, and in the end, you know, I lost my job there. But
Stephen, can I ask you a question at this point? Right? Because you've got such a good relationship with a guy, you obviously really like him.
Yeah.
As this thing begins to unravel, and boy did it unravel, did you get concerns for him? Did it seem to be having a hell of an impact on him as a human being? And I'm saying that as the guy on the other side of the fence that was, you know, having to write, you know, critical articles and calling for him to go. But at the same time as you're doing all that, and you're doing it from the perspective of, you know, first and foremost, a Scottish supporter with a typewriter, effectively. You can see that this isn't working, that the situation is deteriorating. But you're on the inside of that. I was worried about him in terms of the impact it was having on him and his health. It
was a difficult period for George.
Was there any point where you felt like sitting him down and saying, George, I think we might wish to step away from this?
It wasn't really my call, that, Keith. That would have been, you know, George's call, but it was a really difficult period for him, and I feel for him, because I actually think that if George had gone in there at the right time, in the right frame of mind, that George could have done a very good job with Scotland. But I just felt the timing was wrong. He wasn't in a good place in his life, and it was reflected by what eventually happened.
And throw into the mix in the middle of all this, we had Boozegate and the situation at Cameron House Hotel, and you've ended up, again, a guy that likes to stay well clear of controversy. You're pitched right into the middle of that shambles as well.
And that was another reason the Rangers fans then grew to resent me as well. I was only doing my job. It was do you know what happened on that? Do you want me to go into it at all?
Yes, no. Please do.
I came down in the morning to meet my family. It was the Sunday morning, I believe. Yeah.
Just got back from Amsterdam.
Yes, and I came down to meet my family, and I entered into the bar area, and then I walked back out of the bar area. And as I was walking out the bar area, I thought to myself, why has Barry still got all his gear on? Right? And also Allan McGregor. So anyway, me along with one of the barmaids and a member of staff, we guided them up to their room, and we took them back to their room and put them in the room. And of course, I thought that was it. And I went back down to meet my family. But what transpired was that Barry then, from his room, decided to go back down the stairs. And I think then he went into the health club, of course, where everybody could see him. And then the rest is history. But
did they not hear the music and thought it was a nightclub?
but
I was told at the time.
Yeah, whatever it was, that's the reality of it. That's what happened.
Was there not one or two that escaped by the skin of their teeth there as well?
There was
I'm looking at the former Celtic captain.
Yeah,
I just got up the stairs 5 minutes before you came down.
But my point was, when I arrived, it was Allan and Barry. That's who I came across at the time, and then escorted them back to the room along with a couple of members of staff, and I left it at that, and I went and met my family. But the rest sort of unravelled over the next day or so.
So what happens then when they picked you up at the gym? Did you have to get involved again?
No, not at that stage. But I always remember having a conversation with Barry after it, and Barry wasn't happy about the whole situation. And I understood that he didn't feel he'd been protected. He felt that he'd been hung out to dry. But I had to remind Barry, and I said this to Barry, that ultimately it was his behaviour, it was his decisions that had got him into that situation. And, I don't think he was happy about the way it was all handled. But there's also got to be an element of, self-responsibility.
I think in fairness to Barry, I think he's since subsequently, maybe not so easy at the time, I think he's taken full ownership of his part and device where that's concerned.
That's the word I was looking for, Keith. And there was no way from my part that I was looking to hang anybody out to dry. It was the last thing that I wanted to get involved in. But in the end, I became a little bit, again, of the scapegoat. And I'll go back to this, Keith. One of the reasons that I often became a scapegoat was that I never fed you guys stories or information. So all the time, the stories were in other people's words. It was their side of the story. And I never really defended myself on these situations. And often, because of not defending myself, I came out of these situations looking a lot worse than actually I hadn't done anything really, to kind of justify that, David. Yeah. Exactly that. But that's just what I was. I was, as I said at the start, kind of my own guy that lived in my own world a little bit.
At that point, though, Elvis, you must be looking at the whole situation around the Scotland camp and going, this is now beyond toxic. I mean, this is the death throes now. There's no coming back for something like that.
No, there wasn't. It was the end of it there. And I actually left prior to George's end. And again, I felt that the SFA used me a little bit as a scapegoat and allowed George to move on. And I was disappointed the way it ended because they spoke to me. They told me they were going to release a certain statement. And then before I even knew it, there was a statement out there that completely contradicted what they said they were going to release. So I was disappointed with elements of that as well. Because was I felt
effectively bulleting you?
Yeah, bulleting me and kind of passing the buck to me a little bit. And I felt I was harshly treated, yet I was the one that was you know, I tried to do the right things at that particular moment in time. But again, sometimes you need to defend yourself, and I didn't do that.
Listen, every day's a school day, Elvis.
It is.
And especially that's you 33, making your first strides towards coaching. I can only imagine that these lessons, and there's been a lot, can only then stand you in good stead for your career in coaching. And I know you're still hungry to implement them and to move forward. Yeah. I mean, listen, everybody would be dying for the sort of position that you've got at a football club like Brentford, that's so progressive and on the up. But I get the sense there's an itch that's needing to be scratched.
In terms of management, Keith?
Yeah.
Without doubt. You know, I actually, and I mean this without trying to blow my own trumpet, I think that I implemented many things at Falkirk and Coventry and even Fleetwood that were ahead of their time, we played a very progressive type of football, very good brand of football. But at the same time, one of the things that I've learned within this club is maximising all the areas to gain success. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I was very fixated by the way we played, the way we passed, you know, possession of the ball. And I didn't look into things such as set plays enough, the importance of these moments, the importance of certain other aspects of how to win a game. And I was fixated by our style of play, playing this way, possession of the ball, you know, dominating football games. And I've learned a lot in my time at Brentford. You know, I was 10 years there as a kind of head coach. And, you know, there were some successful periods in there. But the 2 years that I've been in here have rounded me a little bit more and made me understand the importance of other elements to success. And I do think that I've got a lot to offer. And I would be a different type of coach as well, just in terms of my maturity, my understanding, again, being in this business a long time now. And I have an itch to go back in. Not right now. Well, I say not right now, but sometimes jobs, you know, are presented to you that you can't turn down. But
well, I was going to say, I mean, right now you've got Dundee Uniteds and Aberdeens.
I'll be honest, Keith. Since I've been in this job, I've been in it 2 years. I've turned down 3 or 4 good opportunities to go again, because I went almost straight from playing to managing. And when you're managing, you're always, you know, developing at the coalface. It's difficult to implement certain things that you would like to do because you're having to win games of football and the pressure's always there. Mm-hmm. This has allowed me to reflect, allowed me to look into things deeper, allowed me to see how this football club works close hand. And there are a number of things that I think can be key to helping me progress in the future.
Right, it's such a success story, Brentford. I mean,
amazing story.
One of the biggest success stories in British football, and I can only imagine in terms of your CV, that's got to be a massive big tick in the box, isn't it? That you've been a part of this, that you're part of the planning and strategy behind one of the most progressive, you know, upwardly mobile football clubs anywhere in British football.
Yeah, it's amazing, and like I've said, there's no stone left unturned here. You know, we look at every single area, you know, that we can make gains in. And it's really important that, and of course, one of the things that allows that is now being a Premier League club, we can invest in more areas than before. But even when they were a Championship club, they were a very progressive club that looked at maximising the resource and looked at all different ways of improving performance. And the other good thing is there's certain strategy strands where we measure performance continuously. And from the football club's perspective, one of the things I love here is that we're always trying to support the manager. We're always trying to help the manager. It's not a blame of the manager. You know, at other clubs, when things start going wrong, you know, people use the manager as the issue. That's not the case here. They would do everything they could to try and support and help the manager through difficult periods.
It's the buzzword alignment, isn't it?
It is alignment. It is, Keith. It's very much that. There's clear alignment here, and he's an excellent manager. He's developed into an excellent manager. So it's been really educational for me, and I've loved it.
How's young Hickey doing? Another boy, obviously, with a Hearts connection.
He's doing well. He's doing well. He's obviously, David, this year suffered with several injuries that had set him back, but he's slowly but surely, gaining fitness again. And I think, now when you talk about 17, 18 million, I know in the Scottish game it's a lot of money, but I think down here when you're talking about 17, 18 million for a player of Hickey's quality, I think we've made good investment there.
An £18 million bargain.
An £18 million bargain, Keith, is quite incredible, isn't it?
What about your own son? What about Aaron?
Yes.
He's out on loan just now?
He is. He's at Accrington.
Yeah.
Interestingly, Keith, I look after within my my remit. Part of that is to monitor our high potential loan players. So I regularly go out and watch our loan players. I have to watch all of their games and collect the appropriate data on them. We currently have 3 players that are out on loan in the lower leagues in England, one at MK Dons, one at AFC, sorry, not AFC, one at MK Dons, one at Forest Green, and one Aaron at Accrington. And then we have a player in Denmark that I monitor also. So part of my job, that's a good element to my job, that I actually can watch my son within my own job. So it's a great thing.
I gave him a 10 out of 10, and you might be looking at a £40 million bargain here. Give him a 5-year deal. His weekly ratings are green. Trust me, right?
Absolutely.
Best young striker in the country.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It's been a fascinating talk. Listen, thanks very much. We'll not take up any more of your time, but it's been really good. And hopefully we'll see you soon. As Keith said, David. As Keith says, there's an Aberdeen job going now. There's a Dundee United job going now. Who knows?
Interesting.
You're an Aberdeen fan. Did say you were an Aberdeen fan.
Yes, very true.
That's the job you always wanted. The one job you always wanted.
Absolutely.